We thank the listeners who have already signed up for our channel and invite new ones to sign up for free as well.
It is fantastic to be back here for another deep dive. And today, we are attempting something that, well, it might sound a bit overly ambitious for a single session. We are going to try to fit the concept of infinity into our discussion.
Oh, no pressure at all, just infinity.
Just the structure of the entire universe.
But we actually have a truly fantastic roadmap for this journey. We are tackling the work of the 17th century philosopher Baruch Spinoza. And I have to say, looking at the research for today's deep dive, this is absolutely not the Spinoza I remember hearing about in passing.
It rarely is.
Yeah.
Spinoza is, well, he is one of those figures in history who gets constantly caricatured. You usually hear him described as a pantheist, someone who thinks trees and rocks are literally God, or sometimes people just dismiss him as a secret atheist.
Which is a very dangerous accusation back then.
Extremely. But the reality of his philosophy is much more radical and, frankly, much more dangerous for the power structures of his time.
Dangerous is definitely the right word. We are talking about a Jewish thinker in Amsterdam who managed to get himself excommunicated by his own community. And then his books were banned by the Christian authorities. He was essentially the ultimate intellectual outlaw.
Precisely. He managed to annoy every major religious and political power in Europe simply by sitting quietly in his room and thinking logically. And today, specifically, we're looking at his deeply controversial concept of the immortality of the soul.
Now, I need to stop you there for a second, because when you hear immortality of the soul, you have a very specific traditional image in mind.
Clouds, harps, angels.
Exactly. Or a sweet reunion with ancestors in a garden somewhere.
And that is exactly why we need a rigorous guide for this deep dive. We aren't just skimming Spinoza's works today, we are using a very specific analytical lens. Today's deep dive is based entirely on the extensive work and analysis of historian and Professor Reuven Feingold from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
The professor's take is fascinating because he totally strips away all that romanticism I just mentioned.
Yeah, he does. The historian treats Spinoza almost like a logician or a mathematician rather than a theologian. He shows us that when Spinoza talks about immortality, he is actually discussing the fundamental architecture of the universe. It is not a waiting room in the sky.
So if you were tuning in expecting a discussion about pearly gates, you might be in the wrong place. But if you are interested in geometry, pure logic, and how reality itself functions, stick around. This is a journey into the structure of existence.
To understand the structural immortality, we first have to understand the structure itself. The analysis starts by defining Spinoza's view of the universe, or what Spinoza calls God. But we have to be exceptionally careful with our definitions here.
Right, because Spinoza uses the word God, but he uses it completely interchangeably with nature, Gesiv Natra, God or nature.
Yes.
But he doesn't mean nature in the sense of a forest preserve or a mountain range, does he?
Not at all. He means the entire comprehensive system of reality. The laws of physics, logic, the galaxies, the subatomic particles, time itself. He views nature as a power of existing and thinking. It is what he calls an absolute infinite.
An absolute infinite. That is a phrase we throw around loosely in everyday conversation. We say the universe is infinite. But in this specific philosophical system, it has a rigid, almost mathematical definition.
It does. The analysis points out that while nature has infinite attributes, meaning infinite ways of existing, we humans are biologically hardwired to perceive only two of them.
Wait, let's pause on that. Nature has infinite faces, infinite dimensions of being, and we only get access to two.
2 out of infinity. It is a terrifyingly small ratio when you really think about it.
It is incredibly humbling.
Uh-huh.
So for the listeners, what are the two attributes we actually possess the hardware to see?
We know nature as extension, and we know nature as thought.
Let's define those clearly so we don't get bogged down in the 17th century jargon. Extension basically corresponds to matter.
Right. Yes, exactly. Extension is anything that takes up physical space. Your body, the microphone in front of me, a star, a single atom. It is the physical world extended in space and time.
And thought.
Thought encompasses ideas, consciousness, pure logic, the mind. So Spinoza looks at the universe and says everything is one single unified substance. But we, from our limited perspective, perceive it through these two distinct lenses. We see bodies in motion and we see ideas occurring.
But the historian points out a massive, almost eerie mystery here. If nature is an infinite totality, that logically implies there are infinite other attributes.
Yes.
Faces of God that are right here, right now, swirling all around us in the room. But we completely lack the biological or spiritual hardware to even sense them.
Precisely. The professor uses a brilliant analogy here. Imagine a creature that lives entirely on a flat, two-dimensional sheet of paper.
Okay, a 2D creature.
Right. It can understand length and width perfectly. It navigates its flat world flawlessly. But if you try to explain the concept of up or down to it, the concept is literally impossible for it to grasp. It doesn't have the reference point for depth.
It just doesn't compute.
Spinoza argues we are that creature. There are infinite dimensions of reality, infinite attributes of God that we are totally blind to. We are locked in our two-channel receiver of matter and mind.
That is both a terrifying and a strangely beautiful thought. But let's bring this back down to the human level, to the core of our deep dive. If we are just tiny specks in this infinite multidimensional machine, where does the human mind fit in? Because usually we think of the mind as a sort of ghost inside the machine. I have a physical body, and inside it there is me, the pilot, pulling the levers.
We ghost in the machine. That is the classic dualism, heavily popularized by René Descartes. Spinoza absolutely, fundamentally rejects that idea.
So if I am not a spiritual pilot wearing a biological mech suit, what exactly am I?
Well, in the analysis, the historian highlights that, for Spinoza, the mind is not an island. It doesn't exist by itself or float separately from reality. The mind is a direct piece of the total thinking structure of the universe.
A tiny fragment of the universal mind.
Yes. And here is the exact definition that matters for our immortality discussion. Spinoza defines the human mind specifically as the idea of the body.
The idea of the body. That phrasing is so peculiar, it sounds almost administrative, like my mind is just the filing system for my physical form.
In a highly complex way, it is. But it is a perfectly dynamic filing system. Think about it. Everything that happens to your physical body, a pinprick on your finger, a ray of light hitting your retina, the chemical shift in your bloodstream, is instantly reflected in your mind as a sensation or a conscious thought.
The mind is the awareness of what the physical extension is doing.
Exactly. They run in perfect parallel. Mind and body are two expressions of the exact same event.
Okay, I am with you so far. Mind and body are linked. They are essentially two sides of the same coin. But here is the massive problem. Bodies die. They rot. They turn back into dust. So if my mind is strictly the idea of this dying body, shouldn't the mind be destroyed instantly when the body shuts down?
Ah, that is the logical trap. And this is exactly where Spinoza places immortality card. The professor breaks down the logic meticulously. If nature possesses infinite thought, meaning nature computes, and knows everything that has ever existed or will ever exist, then nature must contain the idea of your body eternally.
I think I see the turn here. So my physical body disappears from the realm of extension, the physical world. But the idea of my body...
The idea cannot disappear from the realm of thought because the realm of thought is infinite and eternal. You simply cannot delete a fact from the universe. Once you have existed physically, the idea that you existed, the complete data of your existence, is a permanent structural part of the fabric of reality.
This is getting quite abstract again. But the source material provides a modern metaphor here that I found incredibly helpful to visualize this. It compares the Spinoza soul to a computer file.
I absolutely love this analogy. It bridges the gap between the year 1677 and our modern digital age perfectly. It completely strips away the theology and makes it pure structure.
So let's walk through it for everyone listening. Imagine my physical body is the hardware, the specific hard drive sitting right here on a desk.
Right. And it is delicate hardware. It can overheat, it can be dropped, it degrades over time, and eventually the fan stops spinning. That is physical death.
And my mind, my consciousness, my daily experiences, that is a specific file. Let's call it host.doc. It is open, running, and compiling data on that hard drive.
Correct. Now, in a normal non-Spinozist view of the world, if I take a heavy hammer to that hard drive and smash it to pieces, the file is gone. Data loss is complete and permanent.
But Spinoza and the analysis we are following today says there's a massive catch.
The catch is that the universe is a networked system. Because your mind is a direct part of the infinite intellect of God, it is as if that file, host.doc, was working on the local drive, but it was simultaneously and continuously syncing to the cloud, the universal server.
So in the local hard drive, the body gets smashed, the local access is completely gone. I can no longer type on that specific keyboard.
No more typing.
But the data...
The data remains. It is flawlessly conserved in the root directory of the universe. The historian emphasizes this heavily. For Spinoza, the immortality of the soul is not a spiritual journey. It is fundamentally about the conservation of information.
Conservation of information. That genuinely sounds more like theoretical physics than
Yeah.
religion, like the law of conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed.
It is remarkably similar. Spinoza actually writes in his masterwork, The Ethics, and this is a central quote from the analysis. The mind cannot be totally destroyed with the death of the body, but something of it remains and is eternal.
Something of it remains. That is the catch, isn't it? Because when I think of me surviving death, I want it to be me, my specific personality, my memories of childhood, my preference for dark roast coffee. Does the universal backup keep all of that? Or is it just the raw, cold data code?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right.
And it is where Spinoza gets admittedly a bit cold. Most scholars, and certainly the analysis we are exploring, suggest this is not a personal immortality in the way human beings usually crave it.
So I do not wake up in the cloud and say, hey, nice view.
No, it is highly unlikely you wake up and ask for a tour. It is that the ultimate truth of your essence is perfectly preserved. It is an objective immortality, not a subjective experiential one.
So I don't get to hang out with my friends and family. I just become a permanent, indelible record in the cosmic database.
Essentially, yes. It is meant to be a logical comfort, not necessarily an emotional one. If the universe is infinitely intelligent, it logically cannot forget you. But it doesn't mean you keep experiencing a linear narrative.
I can entirely see why the analysis calls this concept abstract. It doesn't exactly leave you feeling warm and fuzzy.
Perhaps not warm and fuzzy, but it does make you feel profoundly meaningful. You aren't a cosmic accident. You are a strictly necessary component of an eternal, infinite system.
Okay, so we have established the what. We are data syncing to the eternal cloud. But can Spinoza explain the how? How does this cosmic backup mechanism actually function? Is there a physical or logical connection he points to?
Here's where we hit a massive wall. The expert analysis points out what he terms an epistemological barrier.
A barrier to our capacity for knowledge.
Yes. Remember the 2D paper creature we mentioned earlier? To truly explain how the backup mechanism works, we would need to fully understand the intricate connections between all the infinite attributes of nature. We would need to step back and see the whole machine operating.
But we only see the two gears, extension and thought, matter and mind.
Right. We can logically deduce that this immortality exists, the math demands it, but we absolutely cannot explain the mechanics. We don't know how the body and mind fully articulate with the infinity we cannot see. We are trying to debug a vast computer program where we only have access to a fraction of a percent of the code.
The historian also makes a really fascinating connection here to the mystic Kabbalists. I have to admit, I was completely surprised by that. Spinoza is usually portrayed as the ultimate champion of pure, dry rationality.
He is a rationalist, certainly, but we have to remember his context. He was living in a time, and originally within a community, deeply steeped in complex Jewish mysticism. Feingold references a definition of God from the mystical tradition that echoes Spinoza almost perfectly. God is an infinite substance composed of infinite attributes, of which we know only two, extension and thought.
That is striking.
It is. That conceptual structure mirrors the ancient Kabbalistic idea of Ein Sof, the infinite, totally unknowable God that exists beyond human comprehension.
And he uses this word substance constantly. In normal English, substance implies something material like a chemical or clay. But Spinoza means something vastly different, doesn't he?
He uses it in the strictest philosophical sense. Substance is that which is subsistent by itself.
Meaning it doesn't need a creator.
Exactly. It doesn't need a creator, and it doesn't need a battery pack to keep running. Nature exists simply because it is nature. It is a cause in itself.
It is the ultimate perpetual motion machine.
An infinite, unbreakable chain of cause and effect. Nature produces nature, which produces nature eternally. And because it is completely self-generating and infinite, it maintains infinite properties. We are just temporary physical ripples in that one giant eternal substance.
Okay, I want to pivot here, because we have painted a picture of a universe that is logical, massive, unfeeling, and eternal. And we have established that our data is backed up in this system forever. You would think if a philosopher logically proves that you are immoral, his very next instruction to humanity would be, so focus on that. Prepare your soul for the great backup.
You would certainly think so. That is what almost every religious tradition in history does. Focus entirely on the afterlife. Purify and prepare your soul for the next stage.
But the analysis points out that Spinoza does the exact opposite.
This might be my absolute favorite part of the entire discussion. It is what we can call the Spinoza's paradox. Even though the soul is structurally immortal, Spinoza argues fiercely that a free man, which is his ideal of a truly wise person, should think about death basically never.
Never. Not at all.
He is unequivocal. He says the wise man thinks of nothing less than of death.
So his advice is to completely ignore the backup, because the backup is automatic.
Exactly. It is a background system process. You do not need to manage it. You cannot change it. The historian emphasizes that Spinoza's immense philosophical system is fundamentally obsessively focused on life.
And not just life in some abstract sense, but life right here, right now, in the physical world.
Yes. Spinoza argues that a free person should not be guided by the fear of death, because death is just a transformation of data, a shift in the system. And equally, we should not be guided by the hope of a heavenly reward or superior spheres.
Because both fear of hell and hope for heaven are ultimately distractions.
They're massive distractions. They take you entirely out of the present moment and out of your actual practical reality.
So what is the directive then? If I'm not worrying about dying, what am I supposed to be doing with my time?
The directive is to radically improve your power of acting right now. Improve your life today through self-knowledge, through understanding how your own emotions mechanically work, through respecting yourself and deeply understanding nature.
So to philosophize isn't to prepare for dying. It is to understand human nature better every single day.
It is about profound presence. It is about realizing your specific insertion within this total nature. The more you genuinely understand the laws of the universe, why people act the way they do, why you feel the anger or joy you feel, the more you actually understand God.
And that understanding is the goal itself.
That understanding is its own complete reward. Spinoza calls it beatitude or blessedness. It is a state of mind where you finally stop fighting reality and start understanding your place in it.
There is that famous quote cited in the text, and I think it sums up this entire philosophical stance perfectly. Let me read it. A free man thinks of nothing less than of death, and his wisdom is a meditation not of death, but of life.
It is truly one of the heavy-hitter quotes of Western philosophy, and it beautifully encapsulates that ethical twist the professor discusses so well. The immortality is abstract. It is just a fact of the operating system, but the mission of the human being is entirely concrete. Be rational, be joyful, be useful to others.
It is startlingly modern. It is almost completely secular in its daily application, but it is backed by this massive, awe-inspiring spiritual architecture. It basically says, you are eternal, so stop worrying about eternity. Go do the dishes properly.
Or go understand exactly why you hate doing the dishes and free yourself from that negative emotion. That is the essence of Spinoza.
Now, we have thrown a tremendous amount of heavy concepts at you today. Logic, multidimensional geometry, infinite attributes, cloud backups. Spinoza is notoriously difficult to read. He writes his books literally like geometry proofs. Proposition 1, proof, QED. It is not exactly a light beach read.
It is certainly not a beach read. It requires immense patience and usually a good dictionary.
But for those who want to punish themselves, or rather, enlighten themselves, the analysis from Professor Feingold recommends some very specific resources to go deeper into the bibliography.
Yes, absolutely. If you want to see the rigorous scholarship behind these interpretations, there is a fantastic reading list provided in our source material. Obviously, the primary source is Spinoza's own work, The Ethics. The specific translation mentioned by the historian as being highly precise is the one by Thomas Todo.
And for commentary. Because I imagine most people definitely need a guide when they are wading through the ethics for the first time.
The list highlights Felipe Alcántara Jabara Tavares. He wrote a deeply analytical piece titled The Eternity of the Mind in Spinoza. That one really dives into the core tension we talked about earlier, how the ultimate heretic found a purely logical salvation.
Excellent. And what about the emotional or psychological side of his work?
For that, there is Marcos Egleiser's work, Spinoza and Human Affectivity. That is perfect for understanding the psychology aspect and how we navigate our daily emotions. And then for the complex time travel concepts, the difference between human duration and universal eternity, there is Erika M. Itokazu's work, Time, Duration, and Eternity in Spinoza's Philosophy.
That sounds exactly like the one to read to understand the whole computer backup concept on a much deeper level.
Definitely. Also, we cannot forget Stephen Nadler. He is an absolute heavyweight in modern Spinoza studies. The text mentions his work Spinoza's Heresy and Eternity and Immortality in Spinoza's Ethics. Those are essential reading for anyone serious about this topic. And finally, Joseph Moreau's Spinoza and Spinozism remains a classic overview in the field.
That is a remarkably solid reading list. It should keep anyone busy for at least the next decade.
At least.
You know, looking back at everything we've covered in this deep dive, What really stays with me is that ethical balance you mentioned at the end. Spinoza seems so incredibly cold at first glance. He is intensely logical, and he treats God essentially like a math equation. But the final result of all that cold math is this profound, beautiful lack of fear.
That is the true genius of it. He uses the coldest logic of geometry to arrive at a place of complete emotional peace. He tells us unequivocally that we are part of something infinite, something that literally cannot be destroyed. We are data in the divine computer. And simply knowing that we are a necessary part of the operating system allows us to stop panicking about the end and start actually living.
We are just a few lines of temporary code, but we are eternal code.
And that is a perspective shift worth having every single morning. How does knowing you are an eternal piece of geometry change how you drink your morning coffee?
That is the perfect provocative thought to leave you all to mull over. On that note of eternity and daily reality, we are going to wrap up this deep dive. It has been an absolute pleasure unpacking the infinite with you.
The pleasure was entirely mine. Navigating Spinoza is always a journey worth taking.
Thank you very much for having been with us. If you liked it, do not forget to sign up for free on the channel. And from now on, we invite you to follow the next episode.